G'day, I'm Bernard Gaynor and today we're going to talk about Israel Folau. Let me start at the top. This is Raelene Castle. And even though Raelene Castle looks like she's auditioning for the lead role in a Hollywood blockbuster in which a transgender woman and a radical lesbian feminist find common ground through gentle and tender comedy while raising awareness about climate change as they travel across America on a stolen electric scooter with an incel hitchhiker named Jason. She's actually not. Instead, Raelene is a great leader. See?
What would you define, as perhaps the 2 or 3 critical characteristics for being a great leader?
You have to earn trust and respect.
Like all great leaders, Raelene Castle has principles, and she sticks to them. She says what she means. For instance, just a couple of days ago, she said this.
Rugby is a sport that continuously works to unite people, regardless of their race, religion, gender or sexuality. All people are welcome to be part of the rugby family.
And this great leader uttered these words at a press conference where she also announced that Israel Folau would be sacked for his Christian views on sexuality. Also see.
Rugby Australia and New South Wales Rugby Union have today served Israel Folau with a breach notice over the posts on social media platforms Twitter and Instagram on April 10.
Obviously, when the great leader Raelene Castle said that rugby welcomes all people, she did not mean Israel Folau, and she certainly did not mean Christians. I mean, Raelene probably doesn't even think they're human, so why would they be allowed inside her castle? Now, if all of this is doing your head in, and you're having a little trouble understanding the hypocrisy, don't worry, I'm here to help. There are 8 things you need to know about this saga. Let me explain all the ways that Raelene Castle is a great leader and Rugby Australia is not imploding and tearing down the last vestiges of freedom in Australia as it goes down. Number 1. Raelene Castle is destroying rugby in Australia. Rugby Australia decided to axe the Western Force in 2017 to save $6 million a year. And it did this even though Andrew Farce personally offered to stump up $50 million from his piggy bank to keep the team alive. Fast forward 2 years and Rugby Australia is now going to have to pay out probably $4 million for Israel Folau's salary, plus another $850,000 plus a year for Raelene Castle's annual salary, plus any legal costs associated with this drama. That's likely to add up to a tad more than $6 million. So guess what? It would have been cheaper for Rugby Australia to keep the Western Force alive and allow Israel Folau to have his view. But it hasn't done that. Instead, on the eve of the World Cup, it's gone to war with its star player and told all the other Israel Folau's out there that they are not welcome. I don't know if this is going to be a problem considering half the Australian side are Pacific Islanders and the kids of this community basically keep junior rugby alive in Australia. But it's a good thing Raelene Castle is such a brilliant boss that she knows the Pacific Islander community has a strongly held view that there should be a separation of church and the footy field. Number 2, rugby union in general has gone nuts. Now, bear with me because this is so weird you couldn't make it up, even if you were partying with Carmichael Hunt and a truckload of drugs. And we'll get to that in a second. But there is a team in New Zealand called the Canterbury Crusaders, and after the Christchurch terrorist attack, they're probably going to change their name because, well, it's Islamophobic. And over on the other side of the world is another team based in London called the Saracens. Now, for those who know a little bit about their history, the Saracens spread Islam at the point of a sword across the Middle East, North Africa, and into Europe. And the Crusaders fought the Saracens, especially to try and free the Holy Land from their control. Now, one of the messages that the Saracens spread was that it was okay to execute homosexuals. That's the Sharia law part of it. So, while the Canterbury Crusaders are probably going to change their name, the Saracens aren't. Even though the jihadis are still a bit miffed about the whole Crusader thing and are responsible for umpteen dozen terrorist attacks across Europe and the globe every year. Now, to make matters more complicated, there's a bloke who plays for the Saracens, and his name is Billy the Niplua. And he has earned himself a formal warning for daring to agree with Israel Folau. Billy did not mention hell, but he did say that men were meant for women. So, in general terms, it's okay for a rugby team to be named after the Saracens, who used force to spread the view that homosexuals should be executed, but it's not okay to play for this team if you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. And it's definitely not okay for another rugby team to be called the Crusaders, even though the Crusaders fought the Saracens. And somewhere in all of this is Sonny Bill Williams. Sonny Bill Williams is a high-profile Kiwi player who converted to Islam, quotes from the Quran on his Twitter page, and who converses on social media with a mufti who once said, "Gays are worse than animals." Like the exalted one Raelene Castle said, rugby welcomes all people, even the people who think the other people aren't human. Perhaps if Israel Folau was Muslim, Raelene Castle would have visited a mosque with him after he made his comments. But he isn't, so that didn't happen. Number 3. The other Kiwi lady joins in. Now, Raelene Castle isn't the only Kiwi woman swinging handbags at Israel Folau. Their Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has joined in. She stated that she disagrees with Israel Folau before adding that this was a matter for Australia. At least she knows her boundaries. Now, those who can remember back to, the end of March, will know that Jacinda Ardern donned a hijab, broadcast the Islamic call to prayer across the length and breadth of the nation she leads, and then personally expressed her acknowledgement that Muhammad is Allah's prophet. And she did this in Arabic.
The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said.
And those who can remember back to point 2 in this video will know that Muhammad is the same prophet that told us it was okay to execute homosexuals. It's a good thing that Jacinda Ardern has been decreed a great leader in the same mould as Raelene Castle, otherwise some of us might think she has no idea what she's doing. 4. Israel is a very naughty boy. To add some context to the gravity of Israel Folau's crimes, consider this. Todd Carney urinated in his own mouth and went on to play Super League in Europe. Wayne Carey had an affair with his then captain and former best friend's wife before being picked up by the Adelaide Crows. He is now a regular face of AFL broadcasts today. Steve Smith, David Warner and Cameron Bancroft blatantly cheated during a cricket test against South Africa, using sandpaper to alter the condition of the ball. All 3 are now eligible to represent this nation again. And Carmichael Hunt was arrested for drug use. He's now playing for the New South Wales Waratahs, the same team that Israel Folau can no longer even train with. Clearly, Israel Folau's call for virtue is an affront to sport in Australia. If you had to be a good person rather than just a good player to earn the big bucks on the sporting field, there will be tumbleweeds rolling across the sporting stadiums of Australia. I mean, consider this. If Israel Folau had got blotto on the weekend and burnt down a disabled kid's school, it would have been relegated to the ho-hum section of sporting scandals on page 47 of the local rag. If he had run naked through Bill Shorten's latest press conference and was unfortunate enough to get sacked, Peter Beattie would have been on the phone to his manager in an instant. But Peter Beattie, the head honcho of NRL in Australia, has decreed that Israel Folau is off limits. I mean, that is virtue signalling taken to its highest extent by a guy who runs an industry full of professionals who habitually make the newspapers for their drunken indiscretions. 5. The anti-Christian witch hunt is taking time off for Easter. This is probably the part I like the best in this entire farce. Rugby Australia wants to sack Israel Folau, but it can't do that until it holds its kangaroo court. And it can't do that because pretty much everyone at Rugby Australia is taking the weekend off to commemorate the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's called Easter. It will be very interesting if this goes to court. Personally, I hope it does go to court, because our legal system is so concerned about obtaining the facts of the matters that it allows people to swear on the Bible that they are telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help them God. This would be the same Bible that Israel Folau quoted from. The same Bible that Raelene Castle says is so offensive that if you merely quote from it, you can no longer play rugby for Australia. And it's the same Bible that our Prime Ministers and Governors General are sworn into office on. Basically, Raelene Castle is not just at war with Christianity, she has decided to go to town on our entire civilization as well. 7. Lies, lies, lies. At the heart of this farce is a single massive lie. Raelene Castle says the decision to sack Israel Folau has nothing to do with his religious views and instead merely an administrative matter. This is what she said the other day. This is not a religious discussion. This is a discussion around the employee-employer relationship and the values and contractual arrangements within that agreement. That's the basis on which we've served him a breach notice. Now, just for the record, here is Israel Folau's post. This post mentions Jesus. It says, repent. It quotes from the Bible. And it lists a bunch of people that pretty much the entire world has always accepted are destined for hell unless some form of remedial action is taken. As far as religious things go, Israel Folau's post is about as close as you can get to the top of the scale without setting foot inside a church on a Sunday morning. But if you believe this has nothing to do with religion, then you'll also believe that the Bledisloe Cup has nothing to do with rugby, and is instead an international business meeting between representatives of Australia and New Zealand to decide the location of a disputed historical artefact. The deceitful arrogance of people like Raelene Castle, quite frankly, does my head in. She knows full well this is about religion. She knows full well she is leading the charge to destroy freedom for Christians in Australia. And she is so tremendous that she can't even bring herself to explain what she is actually doing. Number 8. The Gaystapo has been unleashed. In late 2017, Australia was warned that the push for homosexual marriage would destroy freedom for Christians in this nation. And well, we're seeing that bear fruit before our very eyes. In the lead up to the campaign, the CEO of Qantas, Alan Joyce, boasted this. If you're unhappy with a company that's involved in the campaign, you won't be able to bank and you won't be able to fly anywhere. And now it seems that you won't be able to play sport either. This would be the same Alan Joyce that has entered into an agreement with Royal Brunei Airlines, an airline owned by a nation that has now implemented stoning for adultery and the execution of homosexuals under Sharia law. Hypocrisy, anyone? Joyce and his cronies are intent on using the power of big business to turn us all into religious and political slaves. Remember, Israel Folau criticised a number of people, but it is not the idolaters and the atheists who are unhappy. It is not the fornicators and the adulterers. It is not the thieves and the liars. Hell, Israel Folau even criticised the Catholic Church, a religion I love, but we're not jumping up and down to have him sacked. It is only the homosexual activists who are demanding his head. They want a sacrifice and they are determined to get it. And they jump up and down and claim that freedom of speech does not mean that you are free from the consequences, like losing your job. Well, this is the point. If you can't express your religious beliefs without losing your job, then you don't have freedom of religion in this nation. And it seems painfully obvious that the homosexual community want to prevent Christians in Australia from expressing any views at all. If action is not taken to swiftly repeal the anti-discrimination laws which have been rolled out across this nation and especially inserted into the HR policies across workplaces, things are going to get very bad indeed for Christians in this nation. Israel Folau will not be the last Christian thrown to the lions. And while he can probably afford some time off his work, the average punter can't. If he can't make his mortgage repayments, he's going to lose his house. Christians in Australia stand on the threshold of a dark age, and this is probably the most important point of all. Israel Folau plays a game for a living, yet he is doing a far better job of defending Christian teachings than most of the bishops. We have a serious problem on our hands, and unless the bishops step up to the plate and this changes, things are only going to get worse, especially as Bill Shorten may well become the Prime Minister in the next few weeks. And he said that he backs the decision to sack Israel Folau, even though he promised Australians during the homosexual marriage campaign that he would protect our religious freedom. I don't think he will.